G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing another spin axis video with the Garmin. However, today we're going to be doing it with the driver. And this is where a lot of people are going to run into a lot of issues with the Garmin R10 and spin axis. And the reason for that is because with driver, because it is a longer club head compared to an iron and the center of gravity is pushed further back and down, gear effect comes into play a lot more with the driver and woods versus the irons. With the irons, the CG is so close to the face that really the only gear effect you're going to get is a vertical gear effect. So if you hit the ball low on the face or high on the face, there's going to be very minimal gear effect with the irons if you miss hit horizontally. Compare that to driver. Any miss on this face, you're going to get a lot of gear effect with the ball. Now, the issue with gear effect in the Garmin, let's talk about that quickly. So because the Garmin is a radar-based unit, it isn't able to tell where on the face the driver was struck. And the issue with that is, let me go to ball to explain. So if you strike the ball low on the face, so at the bottom of the club head with the driver, the actual head of the driver gets deflected downwards and it creates increased spin on the ball. If you hit the ball high on the face, the head deflects upwards and therefore you get less spin on the ball. What happens if you hit the toe? So if you hit the toe of the club with your driver, the club face gets deflected open, which causes the ball to take off way right. However, because of gear effect, the ball actually spins with a left spin axis, so you get draw. And vice versa on the heel. If you hit the heel, the club face is going to deflect closed, but then because of gear effect, the ball's going to have a right spin axis, so it's going to fade back towards the fairway. Why is that important? So that is important because the Garmin cannot tell on this club face where you're striking the ball. So if you look at the Garmin software on GS Pro, every shot is going to be out the dead center, or the Garmin's going to think you've hit it out the dead center of the club. If you hit it off the toe with the Garmin, it's going to take that deflected open club face as club face at impact. So essentially what it's doing is it thinks that at impact, your club face is actually, say, 5-6 degrees open, when in reality, it's been deflected open, but because of gear effect, which the Garmin can't read, the ball's going to draw. So what happens with the Garmin is if you toe a shot, it's going to take that deflected club face as your club face at impact, and then the ball's just going to go dead straight. And the same for the heel. If you hit the heel, it's going to deflect the club face closed, and with gear effect, it would spin back. Because the Garmin can't see that you've hit it out the heel, it can't take that gear effect into account, so it's just going to start left and go dead left. So that's why the Garmin R10 is going to struggle with off-center hits, especially with driver and woods. So why doesn't the Rapsodo struggle with this? Well, the Rapsodo is using the cameras and the dots on the ball, the RPT ball, to actually calculate the spin axis. And that's where it can read spin axis. Because the Garmin doesn't have a camera, it's just a radar-based unit, it cannot take gear effect into account. And therefore, your missed shot shapes are going to be amplified with the driver or woods. And this is something that isn't new. This is exactly what we saw with TrackMan up until they added the camera and they started using gear effect in their algorithm. With TrackMan now, it actually uses the camera to figure out where you strike the ball on the club head, and then it takes that into its calculation. Because the Garmin R10 doesn't have a camera, it can't do that. So it's pretty much an early version of TrackMan, but a lot cheaper, and the radars probably aren't as good. But in saying that, we all know it is very, very accurate. So let's hit a couple of drives today, and I'm going to do the same thing as I did in my 7-iron video. I'm just going to do some stock standard drives. Everybody knows I hit a slight draw, and we're just going to see how that goes for the Garmin. And then I'm going to try and really hit some shots right to left and left to right, and we'll see how the Garmin goes. Because I'm not a robot, and I don't hit the center of the face all the time, we will see gear effects come into play, and I'll talk through that when it happens. All right, let's get started. I just wanted to say, just like in my previous video, I am going to use the RPT ball, and I'll show that. I am using a metallic dot, and I'll show how big that dot is. So that's the dot there. It's actually a square because it was a lot easier to cut out of the tape that I showed before. I have got a link in the description of my old video for this tape that I bought. It was $20 from Bunnings. I got the price wrong in my previous video. I'll link it in the description of this video as well. So if you want to get some tape, it's just insulation or ducting tape, and that's all it is. It's very, very skinny tape, and it's just a foil dot there that you can see. Another thing, I haven't warmed up at all for this test, and there's a good reason for that. The reason is because if I'm not warmed up, I'm gonna hit a lot more missed shots. I'm not gonna hit them as consistent. I'm gonna be hitting them all over the face as I warm up. And so what I'm hoping is with this test, because I am warming up and I have those miss hits, this should really be like the worst case scenario for this unit. Once I'm warmed up, I'm generally pretty good with hitting the middle of the club face. So I thought with this test, I would just do it while I'm warming up to give you a better idea of miss hits and how they affect the Garmin. Oh, well, not a bad drive to start off with, actually. Pretty good. I love that neutral club path. Okay, so let's go over to spin axis. I will get the correct metrics up here, so I'll change them on the Rapsodo. We'll take out, I'll leave carry-in so people can see it. I'll take out ball speed. I'll replace it with spin rate. So we've got spin axis, carry, and spin rate there. And on the Garmin, there you go, 269 versus 279 already. Scrolling over, we're gonna have spin and spin axis. So it looks like the Garmin missed the spin with that dot on the driver. And that's probably gonna happen because there is actually, for people interested, there is a table on the Garmin website that talks about ball speeds versus minimum distances that you need to actually get the required number of revolutions with an RCT ball. Definitely check that out on the Garmin website, because if you've got a higher ball speed, you're gonna need a further distance ball to screen for the ball to actually get the correct amount of revolutions so the unit can calculate or measure the spin. Let's check this out. So we had on the Garmin, we had 2,900 spin, it missed the spin. We had a spin axis of 2.9. On the Rapsodo, we had 2,252 spins, so that's really good. And we had 0.3, so it was a right spin axis. It's just the Garmin's spin axis was actually more than the Rapsodo, which is interesting because the irons, it was the opposite. Okay, that was slightly out the heel. And this is interesting because it was out the heel and we had a negative spin axis on the Rapsodo. Okay, so on the Garmin, again, it missed the spin rate, 2,800 RPM, and it had a left or a negative 0.6 spin axis, so a baby draw, almost dead straight really. On the Rapsodo, we had 2,450 RPM with a negative 4.6 spin axis. So the Rapsodo, slightly increased spin axis, a bit more draw than the Garmin. However, the Garmin did at least have the correct spin axis. And what you got to remember is the Garmin's using an algorithm to calculate this. The algorithm is based off the club path and the face at impact, which is going to give you face to path. All of those metrics have a degree or two of error, and you can actually see which have the degree or two of error on the Garmin website. So if it misses those by a degree or two either way, that's where you're going to have slightly different numbers than the Rapsodo. Okay, not a bad drive. So we had a draw on the Garmin, which is exactly, that's my stock standard shot. We had 2,770 RPM on the Garmin. We had a negative 4 for a spin axis. On the Rapsodo, we had 2,200 RPM of spin with a 0.8 degree, a positive spin axis. So the Rapsodo had that as a slight fade there, or almost dead straight. The Garmin actually had that as a draw. Okay, that was a mishit, a big mishit. And I definitely towed it. So we're gonna see a big spin axis to the left. It's gonna have a big draw. And what's interesting is the Garmin actually picked up on it. And yeah, I didn't expect that, because generally with the Garmin, if you do tow it, like I was saying, it really struggles with spin axis. Let's have a look at the data. So we had a 3000 RPM backspin with the Garmin and a negative 16.5 spin axis. On the Rapsodo, we had 700 RPM of spin. Wow. Okay, 771 RPM of spin and a negative 26 spin axis. So basically a big toe, like big toe hook or a big toe bomb, whatever you want to call it, a big toe hook, a diving toe hook. So very interesting. And what's interesting as well is it looks like the Garmin is struggling with the spin rate, even though I've got the dot on the ball. The RCT balls definitely did work better than the dot. And it's funny because I had someone comment on my last video that said the dot works for the irons, but then when you get to driver, it struggles. And that's kind of what I'm seeing. So I think he was spot on. I'll have to do a full test RCT versus dot in a future video. Okay, that was a better strike. All right, this is what you got to be aware of with the Garmin as well. If it misses the club path, the face to path, it is calculating all those, but if it misses a lot of the metrics like club face at impact and launch direction, it doesn't send through the data. And so what we can see is that it's missed club path and face to path. It wasn't able to estimate those, and therefore it's just taken launch direction and just gone dead straight. And that's what it does when it misses those metrics, or it can't estimate those metrics. Looking at the Rapsodo, we had 1900 or 2000 RPM for a spin and a negative 14.7 spin axis, so a draw. And that's exactly what it felt like. So the Rapsodo was correct there. Garmin had the launch direction, it just didn't have the draw. Not a bad swing. Okay, so the Garmin had 2,887 for the spin. It had a negative 1.9 spin axis, baby draw. The Rapsodo had 2,100 for the spin with a positive 2.3 spin axis. So Rapsodo there had a slight fade. Garmin had a very slight draw. Both of them, I mean, you could argue that the spin axis is so small that in real life, those would both look pretty much dead straight. So very close for the data. However, you can argue that the Garmin spin axis is the wrong direction compared to the Rapsodo, which we know the Rapsodo is highly accurate with spin axis. Okay, that was pushed. Was definitely pushed, and it was off the toe. And let's see what we got. Right, this is what I was talking about. The Garmin had a 2,800 RPM spin. Again, it's estimating spin. The spin axis though was a 3.8 spin axis. So I did toe that shot and I pushed it. So because of that, the gear effect on the Rapsodo has got the ball drawing back. So let's talk about the data on the Rapsodo. We had 2,160 RPM and a negative 5 or a draw spin axis. Push draw. It felt like a push draw. The Garmin, because of the slight mishit off the toe and the gear effect, it wasn't able to take that into effect. And so it's basically got it starting right with a fade. Whereas the Rapsodo has picked up on the gear effect because it's reading the ball and reading the actual spin axis on the ball, and it's showing a push draw, which is exactly what it felt like. Okay, so that's the stock shots done. What I'm gonna do now is hit a couple of big draws and a couple of big fades, and we're just gonna see how the Garmin handles those. So we'll start with a couple of draws. So these should be quite significant draws. I'm really gonna try and get these moving right to left. Right, looking at the data, we had 2,850 spin on the Garmin. We had a negative 6.5 spin axis. On the Rapsodo, we had 1,500 for the spin and a negative 26.5 for the spin axis. It definitely was a big draw, if not a hook. The Rapsodo there nailed it. That's exactly what it looked like. The Garmin, it had the correct shape, but it just is not showing as much of a hook as that ball actually did have. Okay, we'll do another one of those and I'll really try and hook it again. Should be hooking. Okay, and this is where the Garmin has missed its calculation now and it's not able to estimate club path or face to path. And therefore, the ball's taken off right and gone dead straight. Whereas the Rapsodo, because it's reading the spin axis of the actual ball with the cameras, it's picked up on the spin axis and it's got it exactly like it was. I really tried to really rope hook that one, and that's exactly what the Rapsodo is showing. Okay, interesting. We had 2,800 spin on the Garmin with a -14 spin axis. On the Rapsodo, we had 1,600 spin with a -16 or -17 spin axis. So both of them there, pretty close in terms of spin axis. In terms of spin rates, obviously the Garmin's not picking up on this metallic dot on the RPT ball, but in terms of spin axis, that looked pretty good. All right, let's now do the opposite. We'll try and hit some big slinging cuts back to the fairway. Okay, that should be slinging. And the Rapsodo picked up on it. Garmin again missed the calculations, so it can't give us an estimated club path face to path, so therefore is not going to get spin axis. Rapsodo nailed it. That's exactly what it felt like. We've got 3,300 for the spin and a 11.6 spin axis. Again, Garmin not able to get the club path face to path and therefore cannot give us an estimated spin axis. Rapsodo read the ball, read the spin. We've got perfect shot shape, perfect spin axis, and good spin. Okay, here we go. Garmin got the club face there. So we had 2,900 RPM on the Garmin with a 6.9 or a 7 spin axis, so a fade, a pretty big significant fade. And then on the Rapsodo, we had 1,800 RPM with a 6.3 spin axis. So again, showing a significant fade. So that one there was actually quite accurate between the two units. I will do one more, and I'm really going to try and sling this one now. Okay, that's interesting. We had a 2,800 RPM with the Garmin, 3.6, sorry, a -3.6 spin axis. So the Garmin had a draw on that shot. The Rapsodo had 2,600 for the spin and a 7.9 or 8 degree spin axis, so a fade. So that right there is quite interesting that the Garmin read that as a draw, whereas the Rapsodo got that as a fade because it was reading the ball. Very, very interesting. I'm going to hit one more fade. Okay, not a good strike, but the data's there. So we had 3,200 RPM on the Garmin with a positive 10.4 spin axis or a right spin axis. On the Rapsodo, we had 2,300 RPM and a 23.5 spin axis. So Rapsodo showing a big significant fade, if not slice, the Garmin showing a big fade. So very, very interesting there. On that shot there, spin axis on the Garmin was correct. It's just not as much as the Rapsodo. That is very interesting. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to hit some more stock standard shots and I'm just going to see how the Garmin goes. I just feel like I need to have a bit more of a data pool, so more shots just to show an overall average as opposed to having few shots. Okay, so the Garmin missed the algorithm there, so it's just going to give us a spin and it's going to go dead straight. On the Rapsodo, we had a -8 for a spin axis, 1,800 RPM. So again, a slight draw on the Rapsodo. That's my stock shot. Perfect. And like I said, when the Garmin isn't able to do its estimated club path face to path, that's where you're not going to get your estimated spin axis. It's just going to take the launch direction and go dead straight. And that's pretty much exactly what the Rapsodo does when you use a premium golf ball. Okay. We had 2,900, or pretty much 3,000 RPM on the Garmin with a negative 7.2 spin axis, so a draw. On the Rapsodo, we had 3,100 for the spin and a fade. It definitely felt like what I'm seeing on the Rapsodo. I did hit that low on the face and I did hit it out the heel, which would cause the spin to increase and it would also cause a slight fade. And that's what it felt like to me. That was a nice strike. Really like that one. Okay, we had 2,700 RPM on the Garmin with a -7 spin axis, so a draw. That's exactly what it felt like. The Rapsodo had 2,700 for the spin, but it kind of just had a little conniption. I think it missed it, or it had just a misread. We got 0 for the spin axis, and we didn't get a carry distance. So it looks like there was just a slight misread there on the Rapsodo, which is annoying because that was the best drive I've done so far. That was a nice drive. Should be a draw. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it was a fade. Garmin had 2,883 RPM, again, estimated spin. It couldn't estimate all its data, so it's basically taken the launch angle and gone dead straight, the horizontal launch angle. On the Rapsodo, we had 2,100 RPM and a 1.3 spin axis or a slight fade. Let's just look at carry distances. So carry distances there, we had 279 on the Rapsodo, we had 276 on the Garmin. So carry distances are pretty much the same. Not a bad drive, not the best. Okay, I have seen this with the Garmin, and if you watch some of my older videos when I was playing on GS Pro with the Garmin, this definitely happens every now and then with the Garmin. You get this weird misread, which gives you like this massive slice. And that's exactly what we saw there. Look at the spin axis there. We had a positive 30 spin axis. I remember when I was doing these videos saying, I could not, I mean, that is basically hitting, even in a flop shot, you don't cut across the, or you might cut across the ball that much with a flop shot. But I mean, you have to really significantly slice the ball to get a positive 30 spin axis. I mean, that is just crazy. Looking at the Rapsodo, that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like a really nice drive. 2,200 RPM or 2,300 and a negative 1.7 spin axis. For me, that drive felt not bad. It was a slight miss. It was pretty good. But for me, the numbers on the Rapsodo there, accurate. Okay, that's a nice drive to finish on. We had 2,800 RPM on the Garmin. We had a negative 11.2 spin axis, so a significant draw. On the Rapsodo, we had 3,300 RPM. That's quite high, with a negative 1.4 spin axis. So maybe I hit that slightly low on the face, causing the spin to creep up. Let's just have a look at carry distance. We had 283.5 on the Garmin and 278 on the Rapsodo. And looking at ball speeds, I'll change that one. We had 168 on the Rapsodo. We had 164 on the Garmin. All right, so before I wrap up this video, I'm just going to go into the data pages just so everyone can see exactly what you're getting with the Garmin versus the Rapsodo. Okay, so reviewing the data, and I've just noticed that my phone did drop out the screen recording with, I think, 3 shots to go. So that's unfortunate. However, I'm going to go through the data points now to show you exactly how it all looked. All right, so looking at, and one thing to remember from all this data is I was hitting some big slices and big hooks. So take this data with a grain of salt. I think the data to really look at is shot by shot because that stuff is really good. Let's talk about carry distances. So overall on average, the carry distance, we had 271 from the Garmin, we had 260 from the Rapsodo. And again, the Rapsodo picked up on those big slices, the Garmin didn't, so the data could potentially be skewed that way. Looking at club speed, the Rapsodo averaged 107.7. Looking at club speed, the Garmin averaged 106.6. So again, pretty close. Club speed max. What was my max club speed with the Rapsodo? Looks like it was 110.1, I think. 110.6. Let's try to find my max club speed with the Garmin. We had 110.4. So again, it's a shot by shot, but the max speeds are pretty close between the two units. Looking at ball speed, so ball speed was 158.6 on the Garmin, it was 159 on the Rapsodo, so ball speeds are incredibly close. Max ball speed I had with the Garmin was 163.7, and that was the last shot. Max ball speed I had on the Rapsodo was 167.6. Rapsodo's ball speed potentially reading a bit higher than the Garmin on the top end speed. Let's have a look. I just want to show you this on the Garmin. If I scroll over to the right, what you're going to see is all of the times where the Garmin wasn't able to estimate the club path and facer path, and therefore the ball started on the horizontal launch angle and just went dead straight. It happened 7 times out of the 21 shots. So I guess that gives you an idea of what to expect in terms of reads with the Garmin. The Garmin looked like it didn't get a spin rate for the whole session using the metallic dot, so that's also very interesting. But look at all the data you get with the Garmin. It's just absolutely incredible. And I know a lot of it's estimated, but if you get this thing set up correctly and aligned correctly, the estimated data that the Garmin gives you is actually very, very accurate. Okay, let's wrap all of this up. Looking at the shots, with the driver, the Garmin definitely struggles with spin axis. It got spin axis some of the time, and other times it was completely wrong. Gear effect definitely affects the Garmin's ability to read spin axis. This is the major thing, and I've always said this about the Garmin R10. The biggest thing was spin axis, but even more so, the biggest limiting factor right now with the Garmin R10 is it cannot take gear effect into account for its algorithm. And it never will be able to, because it cannot tell where on the club face you hit the ball. Right now, the Garmin seems to be pretty much at the peak of its software ability and what it can give you in terms of shot shape. I don't really see how they can improve the algorithm to improve the spin axis. The Rapsodo, on the other hand, does an amazing job at calculating the spin axis. That's its selling point, is it's going to give you accurate spin and accurate spin axis indoors. Hope that clears things up, and I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, let me know. If you got any comments or questions, let me know down below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.